Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Alright, now we come to the second important topic under the chapter of hire purchase, that is the statutory rights of the hirers. Under this topic, we are going to learn about what are the rights available for the hirers, which is provided by the statute, that is the Hire Purchase Act 1967. So by the end of this topic, you should learn about what are the rights available for the hirer, and then what are the effects if the owner breach such right of the hirer. Alright, the first right is that the right to receive a copy of the hire purchase agreement. Here, by virtue of section 5 clause 1, it means the hirer has the right to receive a copy of the hire purchase agreement within 21 days after the making of the hire purchase agreement. So this is the right of the hirer in consequence of the formation of the hire purchase agreement. So the hirer has the right to receive such copy of the agreement. Otherwise, the owner will be guilty for an offence under the Act, and the penalty is under section 46 clause 1. The second right of the hirer under section 9 clause 1 of the Hire Purchase Act, it is provided that at any time before the final payment, within 14 days after receiving a written request from the hirer, meaning the hirer may request it in writing from the owner to supply the hirer a statement of current position. Otherwise, if the hirer did not receive such statement, the owner is not entitled to enforce the agreement. Dia tak boleh kuatkuasakan perjanjian tersebut. Owner cannot enforce the agreement and cannot recover or repossess the goods from the hirer, and the owner cannot enforce any contract of guarantee against the guarantor. If the default continues for 1 month, meaning that after requesting for the statement of current position, but the owner failed to serve such a statement of current position after 1 month, the owner is guilty for an offence, and the owner will be liable to a fine not exceeding 1,000. This is by virtue of section 9 clause 3 of the Hire Purchase Act. So, what are the contents of the statement of current position? There are the amount paid, meaning the amount which has been paid by the hirer up to the date when the request was made by the hirer for the statement, and then the amount due should there be any default payment by the hirer, the amount which is to become payable, berapa lagi baki nak dibayar, the amount derived from interest on overdue installments. Of course, when there is a delay in payment, so meaning that there are interest to be charged for the amount which is overdue. So all these are the content of the statement of current position. So that's why at any time the hirer has the right to receive this statement of current position to know the situations of the payment of the installments of the hire purchase agreement. The third right of the hirer is that the right which is provided by section 10 of the Hire Purchase Act 1967. Under this section, it is provided that the hirer has the right for the appropriation of payments. This is given in the situation where if the hirer hire more than one goods from the same owner, so there are several installments to be paid to the same owner in 1 month. But let's say in one particular month, the payment is insufficient, meaning the hirer has not enough money to pay the whole installments made with the same owner. So in this situation, the hirer has the right to require the owner to appropriate, meaning to allocate the sum that he paid to any one of the hire purchase agreements, or to any 2 or more of the hire purchase agreements which is made in certain proportions, meaning ikut percentage tertentu, or to the satisfaction of the hire purchase agreements in order ataupun in sequence of the hire purchase agreement, ikut kesesuaian. So the detail about this right of appropriation of payment I have explained in another video. The fourth right of the hirer is that under section 11 of the Hire Purchase Act, the hirer has the right to apply the court's order to remove the goods. By right, it is the duty of the hirer not to remove the goods from the address where it is stated in the agreement. Otherwise, the hirer will be liable for breach of contract. The hirer cannot remove the goods to another place. However, under certain circumstances, if the hirer in need or necessary to remove the goods, he may remove the goods with the consent of the owner. However, if the owner refuses such consent, the hirer has the right to apply to the magistrate court for the removal of the goods. So this right is given under Section 11 of the Hire Purchase Act 1967. Untuk pengetahuan, maksud removal of the goods here adalah memindahkan barang tersebut dari alamat yang telah ditentukan di dalam perjanjian ke tempat lain. Itu dimaksudkan removal of the goods. The fifth right of a hirer under the Hire Purchase Agreement is provided under Section 12 of the Hire Purchase Act. That is, the hirer has the right to assign his rights, title and interest under the Hire Purchase Agreement to another person, which is called as the assignee, with the consent of the owner. Maksudnya di sini, hirer mempunyai hak untuk menyerahkan haknya dan kepentingannya di bawah perjanjian sewa beli kepada orang lain yang dipanggil sebagai assignee ataupun penerima hak dengan persetujuan owner. Yang dimaksudkan penyerahakan ni adalah biasanya dipanggil sebagai sambung bayar. Hirer boleh menyerahkan hire purchase agreement-nya kepada orang lain untuk menyambung pembayaran installment yang telah ditetapkan dalam hire purchase agreement. For example, let's say the hirer hire the goods for 7 years under the hire purchase agreement, but after 3 years or 4 years, he is no longer interested with the goods. Now he wished to assign his hire purchase agreement to the assignee, menyambung, menghabiskan atau menyelesaikan perjanjian sewa beli tersebut dengan menyambung bayar untuk tahun seterusnya sehingga selesai perjanjian tersebut. So ini dikatakan right of assignment, hak untuk menyerahkan hire purchase agreement kepada orang lain sebagai assignee yang akan menyambung pembayaran installments di bawah hire purchase agreement tersebut. This right of assignment can be done with the consent of the owner. However, if the owner unreasonably withhold the consent, refuse to give the consent, so the hirer may assign his right and interest under the hire purchase agreement without the consent of the owner. However, the hirer must apply to the High Court for the declaration that the owner has unreasonably withhold the consent. This is by virtue of Section 12 Clause 3. So, apa yang dimaksudkan consent is unreasonably withheld by the owner? Macam mana situasi yang dikatakan owner enggan secara tidak munasabah untuk membenarkan persetujuannya bagi penyerahakan tersebut? The first one is that when the owner refuses to give his consent without any sufficient cause or reason. Second, the owner requires payment for his consent. So the owner maybe when he said that, okay, we will let you to assign the agreement to another assignee, but you have to make the payment for that consent. So this is unreasonable. So the court may declare that the consent of the owner was unreasonably withheld by the owner. And second situation, when the High Court declares as such upon the application of the hirer. So this is upon the discretion of the High Court atas budi bicara mahkamah untuk menentukan sama ada owner has unreasonably withheld the consent. The fourth situation or the fourth reason is that when the owner requires additional guarantors for the hire purchase agreement. So all these are the reason why the court may declare that the owner has unreasonably, secara tidak munasabah, withheld the consent. So in this situation, the hirer may assign his right under the hire purchase agreement to the assignee without the consent of the owner upon the approval of the High Court. The sixth rights of the hirer is that the rights by operation of law. This right is given under Section 13 of the Hire Purchase Act 1967. Operation of law here means kuat kuasa undang-undang, meaning the rights arise automatically or given automatically to the hirer due to the law. So, this right can be discussed in two contexts. One is if the hirer is an individual person, and the other one is if the hirer is a company. In terms of the individual person, if the hirer is dead, his right, title and interest under the hire purchase agreement will pass to his personal representative or the heirs. Meaning, the hire purchase agreement akan berpindah kepada wakil si mati ataupun warisnya. In terms of the company, if the company becomes bankrupt, the hire purchase agreement of that company shall pass to the liquidator. Now, who is the liquidator? Liquidator here refers to an officer or a person who is specially appointed to wind up the affairs of the company when the company is closing or bankrupt. So, the assets of the company will be sold by the liquidator for the sake of paying off all the company's debts to the creditors. Therefore, the hire purchase agreement of that company will pass to the liquidator for this purpose. So, this is the right by operation of law. The seventh right of the hirer is the right to early completion by virtue of Section 14 of the Hire Purchase Act 1967. Early completion here means penyelesaian awal. Here, by virtue of this section, the hirer has the right to complete the purchase earlier than the actual term of the hire purchase agreement. For example, let's say the hire purchase agreement is for 7 years. But after 4 years or 5 years, maybe the hirer has enough money to pay the net balance of the hire purchase agreement. So the hirer may do so by giving a written notice to the owner and pay the net balance of the hire purchase installments. This right must be observed by the owner, where the owner cannot refuse this right for the hirer. Once the hirer has completed all the payment earlier than the actual terms of the hire purchase agreement, the ownership of the goods will pass to the hirer. The title or ownership of the goods will pass to the hirer. Finally, the last right of the hirer is that the right to terminate the agreement. This is by virtue of Section 15 of the Hire Purchase Act 1967. The right to terminate the agreement is that the hirer is no longer interested to continue with the agreement. He wants to terminate the agreement. So, in order to terminate the hire purchase agreement, the hirer may at any time return the goods to the owner, or under normal circumstances, the hirer may require the owner to sell it to any person introduced by him who is prepared to buy the goods for cash. So, normally, when the hirer is no longer interested to continue with the agreement, he may terminate the agreement by finding a new buyer who interested to buy the goods or who interested to buy the car for cash. So, once he got the buyer, he will introduce the buyer to the owner, and the buyer will make the payment for the net balance of the installments of the hire purchase agreement. So that is how the termination can be done by the hirer under Section 15 of the Hire Purchase Act. For a detailed explanation, you may refer to my another teaching video for this subtopic. To sum up, there are 8 rights of hirers under the statute. First is that the right to receive a copy of the hire purchase agreement within 21 days after the signing of the hire purchase agreement. Second is that the right to receive a statement of current position. Third is that the right to appropriation of payments under Section 10. Fourth is the right to apply court's order to remove the goods. Fifth, the right of assignment. Sixth, the rights under operation of law. 7, the right for early completion. And finally, the right of termination of hire purchase agreement.